My name's Liam. I'm 24. Until last month, I still lived at home. I know some people hear that and immediately picture a lazy kid who games all day and avoids responsibility, but that's not me. I've been working full-time since I was 19. Not a dream job, sure, but it pays the bills and it's honest work. I contribute where I can. I clean up after myself, and I stay out of trouble. I'm not perfect, but I've always tried to be the easy child, the one who doesn't give my parents a reason to worry. And yet, somehow, I ended up being the one they treated like a burden. It started subtly, as these things usually do. My dad would make little comments at dinner, like, "Another slow day at work?" Even though I'd just finished a 10-hour shift, Mom would chime in with, "You know, your cousin Jacob just got promoted. He's really going places." I'd laugh it off at first, thinking they were just trying to motivate me, but the tone got sharper over time. Then came the jokes that weren't really jokes. Dad calling me dead weight when I forgot to take the trash out one night. Mom rolling her eyes and saying, "Guess we're running a charity here," when I asked if we could eat dinner a little later so I could shower after work. Each comment stung, but I swallowed it because I didn't want to start a fight. Still, the air in the house got heavier every week. It felt like no matter what I did, it was never enough. I started staying out later after work just to avoid being in the house, sitting at the kitchen table while they picked apart my day. My sister, who moved out years ago, would occasionally stop by and notice the tension. She'd whisper to me, "Just let them talk. They'll get over it." But they didn't. If anything, it escalated. The breaking point came at dinner one night. We were sitting around the table, eating in that thick silence I'd come to dread, when Dad put his fork down and said casually, "Starting next month, you'll pay rent if you want to stay here." I almost choked. Rent. Out of nowhere. Before I could even respond, Mom added, "Maybe it'll teach you some respect." She said it like I'd been running around breaking their rules or leeching off them, which couldn't be further from the truth. I sat there in stunned silence, pushing the food around on my plate while my parents went back to talking like nothing had happened. My ears were ringing. It wasn't even about the money. I could afford rent. I wasn't broke. It was about what it meant. After weeks of mocking me, belittling my job, and calling me dead weight, this felt like the final shove out the door. My chest was tight, and all I could think was, so, this is how they see me. Not as a son, but as a tenant. I didn't argue that night. I didn't try to defend myself. I just excused myself from the table, went to my room, and sat on the edge of my bed for what felt like hours, staring at the wall. I thought about every moment that had led up to this. The sarcastic jabs, the jokes, the lectures about how I wasn't living up to my potential. I thought about how no matter what I did, it would never be enough for them. Something inside me just clicked. I couldn't live like this anymore. By midnight, I had made my decision. I grabbed a couple of duffel bags, packed up my clothes, my laptop, and anything else I couldn't live without. I moved quietly, careful not to wake them. When I zipped the last bag shut, I stood there for a moment, staring at my half-empty room, feeling a weird mix of sadness and relief. Then I loaded everything into my car and drove away. I didn't leave a note. I didn't send a text. I just left. For a week, I stayed with a friend from work while I figured out my next steps. I kept my phone on silent because I didn't want to see whatever angry messages were surely coming my way. And then one morning, my phone lit up with a call from Dad. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, his voice was frantic. "Liam, why is your room empty? Where are you?" I sat there, phone in hand, heart pounding, as the weight of everything hit me at once. And that was the moment I realized that leaving had rattled them more than I expected. But instead of relief, all I felt was anger bubbling up. I didn't tell them where I was. Not yet. I just said, "You told me I was dead weight. Consider me gone," and hung up. For a moment, I felt powerful. Then the texts started coming in, and the old guilt crept back. First it was, "Dad, you're overreacting. We were just trying to teach you responsibility." Then, "Mom, if you cared about this family, you'd come home and talk it out." An hour later, another text. "You know, your brother has been stepping up and paying us back for everything. Why can't you be more like him?" That one made my stomach twist. My brother, Caleb, was their golden child. He had a cushy job in IT, rarely came home, but every time he did, they treated him like a visiting celebrity. A few days later, my sister texted me, "Mom is telling everyone you stormed out because you didn't want to help pay for the house. She says, you're being dramatic." That one stung. I hadn't told anyone where I was or why I left, but somehow I was already the villain in their version of events. I decided to stop replying altogether, which only seemed to make them more frantic. When I finally checked my voicemail, I found 3 missed calls from Mom. Her voice was cold and clipped in the first one. "If you're not back by Sunday, we'll consider your room gone." In the second, she sounded angrier. "You're selfish, Liam. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." And in the third, her tone had shifted to something almost smug. "Fine. Your brother's going to take your room if you don't come back. Maybe that will teach you a lesson." That last message sent me over the edge. My room wasn't just a room. It was the one place in that house that actually felt like mine. I'd worked hard to buy my own furniture, set it up exactly how I liked it, make it a small refuge from all the tension. The idea that they would just hand it over to Caleb, who hadn't lived at home in years, felt like a slap in the face. And then there were the family group chat messages. Caleb finally chimed in with, "Maybe if you'd grown up and stopped mooching, this wouldn't be happening." That was rich, coming from the guy whose car Dad still made payments on. I stared at that message for a long time, fingers hovering over the keyboard before I finally typed, "Glad to know where everyone stands." I hit send and muted the chat. A few days later, my sister invited me to lunch. I almost didn't go, but curiosity got the better of me. Over coffee, she told me Mom had been using my absence as an excuse to guilt trip her into visiting more. "She keeps saying, 'At least you didn't abandon us like Liam,'" my sister said with an eye roll. "It's getting ridiculous." I laughed bitterly. "Abandon them? They basically kicked me out." "Yeah," she said quietly, "but you know how Mom is. She'll never see it that way." Hearing that hurt more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the way they rewrote the story to make themselves look like the victims. And suddenly, I realized that going back apologizing or trying to reason with them won't fix anything. The next weekend, Mom called again. This time, she sounded syrupy sweet. "Liam, honey, we're having a barbecue next Saturday. Everyone's coming. Why don't you stop by and we can talk?" I almost laughed out loud at the audacity. A week ago, they were threatening to throw my stuff out, and now they wanted me to come play nice for the family. When I didn't respond, Dad sent me a text that simply read, "If you don't come, don't bother coming back at all." That was the moment the shift really happened inside me. Until then, I'd been hurt, angry, maybe even a little guilty. But now I was done. Done playing the scapegoat. Done letting them pull the strings. I didn't answer. Instead, I started thinking about what would happen if I never came back. Really never came back. And for the first time, that idea didn't scare me. It thrilled me. That's when I started planning my next move. The following Friday, I swung by the house when I knew they'd all be out. I wasn't planning to confront anyone. I just wanted to grab the last few things I hadn't been able to take when I left. Some photo albums, my old guitar, and a few boxes from the closet. When I unlocked the front door, the house was eerily quiet. My footsteps echoed down the hallway, and for a moment, I almost felt nostalgic. Then I opened the door to my room and froze. It wasn't my room anymore. The walls, once covered with posters and shelves I'd put up, were bare. My bed was gone, my desk, too. The carpet had been vacuumed clean, and sitting right in the middle of the room was a stack of Caleb's moving boxes. On top of them, taped in Mom's neat handwriting, was a note that said, "Caleb's room." I just stood there staring, my hands shaking. I'd been gone less than 2 weeks, and they'd erased me like I'd never existed. My photos, my books, my guitar gone. I ripped open one of the boxes, hoping maybe they'd just packed my stuff away. But inside was Caleb's gaming setup, neatly labeled. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped me out of it. My heart started pounding as I heard voices. Mom and Dad were home early. I barely had time to shut the box before they came in. Mom saw me standing there and smiled like this was the most normal thing in the world. "Oh, Liam, you should have told us you were coming by." I gestured to the empty room, my voice flat. "Where's my stuff?" Dad shrugged. "In the garage. We needed to get the room ready for Caleb. He's moving back for a while." I felt like someone had punched me in the chest. "You didn't even tell me." Mom tilted her head, her voice calm but condescending. "Well, you made it clear you were done living here. We had to move forward." "Move forward?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You've been calling me dead weight for months. Then you kicked me out, and now you just replace me like I was never here." Dad's expression hardened. "Watch your tone. We've given you everything, Liam. This is our house, and we'll do what we want with it." That was it. The moment something inside me finally snapped. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I wasn't just angry. I felt hollow, like they had taken every ounce of love I tried to hold on to and stomped on it. I went to the garage, found my boxes shoved against the wall, and loaded them into my car while Mom stood there watching, arms crossed. "You're being dramatic," she said as I walked past her. I didn't reply. I just shut the trunk and drove away, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. That night, sitting on the floor of my friend's apartment, surrounded by my salvaged belongings, I let the reality sink in. My parents hadn't just asked me to grow up or contribute. They'd made it clear I was expendable, replaceable. And for the first time, I stopped hoping things would get better. I didn't just want distance anymore. I wanted something else. Something that would make them feel what I'd felt. Not just hurt, but powerless. Because if they thought I was dead weight, they hadn't seen what I could do when I stopped holding back. And that was when the idea for how to hit back started to form. The days after clearing out my things were the hardest. For the first time in my life, I felt truly untethered. No room to retreat to. No house to call mine. No illusion that my parents would ever have my back. I crashed on my friend Leo's couch for almost 3 weeks, trying to piece myself together while still going to work every day and pretending nothing was wrong. Work became both my escape and my prison. I'd throw myself into long shifts just to keep my mind off everything. But every time I clocked out, the reality hit me all over again. I'd sit in the break room, scrolling through my phone, staring at the family group chat, still muted, reading message after message from my parents and Caleb about family dinners, barbecues, and celebrating new beginnings. They weren't even pretending to miss me anymore. One night, after a brutal double shift, I got back to Leo's place to find him asleep in the dark living room. I stood there for a long time, staring at my duffel bag shoved against the wall. That was all I owned now, really. A couple bags of clothes and a few boxes in the corner. Everything else, the room I'd built, the life I'd tried to have, was gone. I sat on the floor, knees pulled up to my chest, and for the first time since leaving, I broke. Not just a couple of tears, but full-on, quiet sobbing that I had to muffle in my sleeve so I wouldn't wake Leo. It wasn't just sadness. It was grief. Grief for the version of me that still believed my parents would come around someday, that if I just worked hard and kept my head down, they'd see me as enough. The next morning, I woke up with puffy eyes but a strange kind of calm. It was like my brain had finally burned through all the denial, all the hurt, all the wishing for things to be different. I wasn't going back. Not ever. If they wanted Caleb to be their golden child, fine. Let them have him. But letting go didn't mean letting them walk all over me. I started working extra hours, not just because I needed the money, but because I had a goal now. Every paycheck, I put aside as much as I could. I cut back on everything. No takeout, no random splurges, just saving and grinding. On my days off, I researched apartments, roommates, even tiny studio spaces I could rent short-term. I wanted my own place, even if it was small, even if it was barely furnished. Somewhere I could shut the door and know nobody could take it from me. At the same time, I started quietly pulling back from my family in every other way. I didn't answer calls, didn't react to their group chat messages, didn't take the bait when Caleb tried to send me updates about how he'd fixed up my old room. I didn't tell them where I was living, and I sure as hell didn't tell them where I was working. For the first time in my life, I was truly out of their reach. And in that silence, something started to shift inside me. Instead of imagining going back to make peace, I started imagining what it would look like to build a life completely on my own terms. And the more I pictured a job, the apartment, the independence, the more determined I became. Then, just when I felt like I was finally starting to climb out of the hole, Mom called one last time and left a voicemail that made my stomach twist. Her voice was cheerful, almost sing-songy. "Just so you know, Liam, we've gone through the garage and donated most of what you left behind. You won't need it anyway, right? You've moved on." That was the last straw. I sat there staring at my phone, and instead of crying, I smiled a cold, humorless smile. They thought they could erase me from their lives like I was some old piece of furniture to be thrown out. Fine. But if they were going to erase me, I was going to make sure they felt the weight of that decision in a way they wouldn't forget. And that's when the real plan started to take shape. Things began to shift slowly at first, almost too subtly to notice. Within a month, I had moved out of Leo's place and into a small studio apartment. It was nothing fancy, barely big enough for a bed, a small table, and my laptop, but it was mine. Every time I locked the door behind me, I felt a rush of relief. No one could barge in. No one could lecture me. No one could tell me what to do with my own space. That feeling of control became addictive. I started getting serious about my finances. Not just saving, but planning. I tracked every dollar, cut out unnecessary spending, and picked up extra shifts whenever they were available. It wasn't glamorous, but watching my savings grow was empowering. It was proof that I didn't need anyone to prop me up. Meanwhile, something unexpected started happening at work. My manager noticed the extra hours I'd been putting in and started trusting me with more responsibility. I was no longer just the guy who clocked in and out. I was training new hires, managing small projects, even covering for supervisors when they were out. Within 3 months, I got a raise. I celebrated by buying a second-hand couch and a real bed frame. Small victories, but they made the apartment feel like a home. The best part was how quiet everything was. No more dinner table jokes at my expense. No more snide remarks about my job. No more constant comparisons to Caleb. For the first time, my life was mine alone, and I could feel myself getting stronger emotionally and mentally. I stopped checking the family group chat entirely. At first, it was hard. I'd open it by habit, half expecting some new comment meant to guilt trip me. But eventually, the silence became comforting. I didn't need their validation anymore. And that's when I started thinking bigger. One night, I sat down with a notepad and wrote out everything I wanted. Not just short-term goals, but the kind of life I'd never thought I could have before. A better job, a car that was fully mine, paid off, a place bigger than this studio, maybe even one day a house. The more I wrote, the more focused I became. And with every paycheck, every extra shift, every small win at work, I got closer to that version of myself. By the time 6 months had passed, I barely recognized the person I had been the night I drove away from my parents' house. I wasn't the quiet, hesitant kid waiting for approval anymore. I was independent. I was capable. And for the first time, I had leverage. Real leverage. Because I no longer needed them at all. That leverage grew when I got a call from a friend at another company who'd heard about the work I was doing. They offered me an interview for a position that paid almost double what I was making. I prepared like my life depended on it, nailed the interview, and landed the job. The first paycheck from that new job felt like holding a key to a completely different future. I upgraded my apartment to a bigger one-bedroom with sunlight streaming in through the windows, a kitchen I could actually cook in, and space to breathe. And while my life was rising, my parents' calls were getting stranger. Occasionally, I'd get voicemails from mom saying things like, "You never come by anymore. It's like you've forgotten where you came from." Or from dad, grumbling about how hard things have been with the mortgage. There was a time when that would have made me feel guilty. Now, it only fueled the quiet resolve building inside me. They were starting to realize I wasn't coming back on their terms. And I was starting to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to make them feel every ounce of the hurt they'd put me through. Because by now, I had the stability, the money, and the freedom to do something they'd never see coming. And that's when I decided it was time to stop just moving on and start turning the tables. The real turning point came one rainy afternoon when I ran into my sister at the grocery store. She was surprised to see me. We hadn't spoken face-to-face since I left. At first, it was awkward, but then she sighed and said, "Look, I don't know if anyone's told you, but mom and dad have been really struggling. The mortgage is eating them alive. They were counting on you paying rent to help keep up with it." I blinked. "So, that's what this was about." She nodded, looking guilty. "Yeah. Dad refinanced the house last year to help Caleb with his business loan, and now the payments are higher. They won't admit it, but they're stressed. That's why they were so hard on you. They thought if they pushed you, you'd step up." Hearing that didn't make me feel sorry for them. If anything, it made me angrier. So, they hadn't just wanted me to pay rent out of principle. They'd wanted me to bail them out of a financial mess they created for Caleb. That piece of information changed everything. After that conversation, I started paying attention. I asked a few subtle questions around mutual family friends, and what I learned was enlightening. Caleb's business hadn't taken off the way he bragged it had. He was still living at home because he couldn't afford a place of his own. And from what I gathered, Dad was covering more than just his car payments. Suddenly, all the pressure, all the guilt tripping, all the lectures about me being dead weight made perfect sense. They weren't just trying to teach me responsibility. They were trying to keep me on the hook to subsidize Caleb's lifestyle. And now that I had my own place, my own money, and no ties to their house, I realized I had something they didn't: independence. I started documenting everything: texts, voicemails, even screenshots of the family group chat where they talked about getting Liam to pay up. At first, I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it, but it felt good to have proof, to see it all laid out in black and white. Then came the moment that sealed the deal. I got a call from my dad one evening, his tone surprisingly soft. "Liam," he said, "we're having a little trouble with the bank. Maybe you could help us out for a few months, just until things even out." I almost laughed out loud. After everything, they still saw me as the backup plan. But I didn't say no. Not yet. Instead, I said, "Let me think about it," and hung up. That night, I sat down at my kitchen table with a blank notebook and started mapping things out. If I played this right, I could not only protect myself from ever being dragged back into their mess, but I could make sure they understood just how much they had underestimated me. I began talking to a financial advisor, something I never would have considered a year ago. I started putting my money into accounts they couldn't access and building a safety net that meant I'd never have to depend on anyone else again. And then I started planning my next conversation with them carefully, deliberately. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to make sure when the time came that every word landed exactly where it needed to. Because now I wasn't just surviving. I was in control. And I knew that the next time my parents saw me, it wouldn't be as the kid they pushed around. It would be as the person they never thought I could become. The question was how to deliver the message so it hurt just enough to make them feel what I had felt. And that's when the perfect opportunity presented itself. The perfect moment came when Mom texted me out of the blue. Family dinner next Sunday. Everyone will be there. We'd like you to come. For a second, I almost ignored it. But then I realized this was exactly what I'd been waiting for. A chance to face them all at once, on my terms, not theirs. I spent the next few days preparing, not just mentally, but practically. I gathered up all the documentation I'd collected, the screenshots, the saved voicemails, even the picture I'd taken of my empty room with Caleb's boxes stacked in the middle. I wasn't planning to throw it in their faces like an angry teenager. No, I wanted it as a quiet reminder to myself of why I was doing this, so that if they tried to guilt me or twist the narrative, I'd remember exactly what had brought me here. When Sunday rolled around, I didn't dress in my usual casual jeans and hoodie. I put on a crisp button-down, real shoes, and carried myself like the adult I'd grown into over the last several months. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Caleb's car parked front and center. Inside, the house smelled like roast chicken, and everyone was already seated around the table. The chatter died as I walked in. Mom's face lit up in what I'm sure she thought was a warm, welcoming smile. "Liam," she said, standing to hug me. "We're so glad you came." I hugged her back politely, not coldly, and sat down. Dad cleared his throat and said, "Before we eat, we wanted to talk about helping with the mortgage." There it was. No small talk, no apology, just straight to the point. I took a deep breath, kept my voice even, and said, "I'm not going to do that." The room went silent. Mom blinked. "Excuse me. I'm not going to pay your mortgage," I repeated calmly. "I've built my own life now. I have my own place, my own bills, and my own responsibilities. You made your choices with the refinance, with Caleb, and you can handle the consequences." Dad's face turned red. "We're your parents. You owe us." I pulled out my phone, opened the family group chat, and scrolled to the message where they'd called me dead weight. I slid the phone across the table. "No, what I owed you was respect, and you lost that the night you mocked me and told me I'd have to pay rent to stay under this roof." Caleb shifted uncomfortably, but stayed quiet for once. I kept going, my voice steady but firm. "I've been saving, working, and building something for myself. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to tell you that you no longer get to make decisions for me or about me. I'm not your backup plan. I'm not your safety net. I'm done being treated like I'm less than." Mom's smile had completely disappeared by now, replaced by a pinched look of anger. "You'd really sit there and watch us lose this house?" I met her eyes. "You watched me lose my room without saying a word. Consider us even." For a long moment, no one said anything. The only sound was the ticking of the kitchen clock. Then I stood up, pushed in my chair, and said, "Thanks for dinner. Enjoy the house while you can." And before anyone could respond, I turned and walked out, leaving behind stunned silence. Driving away, I felt something inside me settle, like I'd finally taken back every piece of power I'd given away. But that wasn't the end, because later that night, I sent them one final message, one that would make sure they understood this new version of me wasn't bluffing. I didn't rush to send that message. I waited until I was back in my apartment, sitting at my kitchen table, the city lights flickering outside my window. I wanted to be calm, collected, deliberate. Then I opened my phone and typed out a single text to the family group chat. "I've removed myself from the co-signed utilities and accounts. Starting next month, you're fully responsible for the bills you signed for. I've also officially changed my mailing address. Please don't contact me unless it's an emergency. This is not a punishment. It's me finally choosing peace." I hit send and set the phone face down. The replies came fast and furious. First, Mom. "Liam, how could you do this to us? We need your help." Then, "Dad, You're abandoning your family over hurt feelings. Grow up. Even Caleb chimed in. Wow, real mature, man. But I didn't reply. For once, I didn't feel the need to defend myself. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my sister. She was half laughing, half whispering like she didn't want anyone to overhear. You won't believe this, she said. Caleb's room flooded because of a broken pipe, and Mom is furious. They can't afford the repair right now and are scrambling to cover it. She actually said, if Liam were here, this wouldn't be happening. I couldn't help it. I laughed, not out of spite, but out of sheer relief. They finally understood that I wasn't coming to save them, that if they wanted someone to blame, they could look at the people still living under their roof. I didn't gloat, didn't post about it, didn't rub it in their faces. I just smiled and said to my sister, I hope they figure it out. I really do. A month after that, I drove past the house on my way to work. There was a for sale sign in the front yard. I parked across the street for a minute, just sitting there, staring at the house I used to call home. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. If anything, it felt like closure, like the final thread tying me to that place had finally been cut. I rolled down the window, took a deep breath, and whispered, you wanted me gone. Now I really am. Then I drove away.